The Rip City Drive.
All right, our next guest is so good that we had to invite him back. And he was kind enough to share some time with us. College football and NFL draft analyst for the BLEAV Podcast Network, host of the First Team Pod on Stadium. And he's on Twitter at Joe DeLeone. Joe, welcome back. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us again. We talked a couple of times with you before the draft. I thought we got to get your take on how some of these things went down. So thank you so much, buddy.
Yeah, of course. Thanks again for having me on, and I'm certainly excited to see how these draft classes pan out, and certainly a lot of craziness that went on this weekend.
Yeah, there's no question. We'll start with the Seahawks since we got a lot of Hawk fans here in the Portland area. I think everyone thought they were going to go, defensive line with their first pick, but they surprised everyone and took Devon Witherspoon out of Illinois, the corner, who might be the best corner in the draft. What do you think about that selection, and what can you tell us about Witherspoon for those who haven't watched a lot of Illinois football?
Yeah, I was really surprised as well, and I was under that assumption that you just stated, that I thought that they were going to go defensive line, especially because the corners in this class were good and Witherspoon was really good. I just didn't know if someone was willing to take as high as 5, especially because of positional value. Corners rarely are good enough to go that high, but it sounds like Pete Carroll really, really likes Witherspoon and has spoken extremely highly of him. What you're getting with him is a very physical corner. He's not big. He's not what we're used to with Tariq Woolen, who's 6'4", 6'3", and massive, and some of these other guys we've seen work in the secondary for the Seahawks. But he does have the mentality, I think, of what has been successful for defensive backs in Seattle. Physical. He comes downhill hard. He's got that click and close ability to plant and go and shut down gaps between him and receivers. I think the way that he plays in press, the way that he attacks the run game and blows up screens, he is really valuable. And again, I think my big reason why I love the pick, and it's crazy to think that it's a great pick for one that no one really considered. Usually when it's an unexpected one, some people think it's a bust, it's a bad pick, but the reason why I love it so much is that I think his mentality fits exactly with what has worked in Seattle's defenses.
Joe, curious, the consensus seems to be that the Eagles killed this draft, and I'm just wondering, are you on board with that?
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as to say it was a perfect draft class. I think some of their picks later on I wasn't totally in love with. Like their pick of Tyler Steen was a fine selection, but probably not going to start. I don't think he really had home to show that he is going to be a starting caliber player in the NFL, and for where they picked him, it was a little early for my taste. But the reason why I'm excited is all the Georgia guys that they got, including the trade of acquiring DeAndre Swift, the former Georgia running back. And I think he's going to work well in that rotation of the 3 guys that they have. But most importantly, Jalen Carter, this is possibly his best situation, not only from a talent perspective, from being in such a talent-rich defense and not having to be the primary guy that needs to be stopped, but because he's playing with a bunch of guys that he's familiar with, in Nolan Smith, in Nakobe Dean, in Jordan Davis, they are going to all mesh together so well. We're going to get to see exactly what won them national championships yet again now that he is amongst this defense. So I'm excited to see what Jalen Carter does. And then I think Nolan Smith is a nice piece where, similar to Carter, he doesn't need to be the primary main guy that's going to get all the attention. There's so many other mouths to feed and to worry about that he can just do his thing and an explosive speed rusher and cause some trouble for offensive tackles. But overall, love the class and especially love what they did in the first round.
We're talking with Joe DeLeone here on the Rip City Drive. Do you know what the Patriots are doing? This is a team that struggled on offense last year, and they got 2 guards, a center, and 2 kickers.
Yeah, it's an interesting draft class, and they started it off with drafting Christian Gonzalez, who's a fantastic football player. But and the thing that stinks for Christian Gonzalez is he's going to do really well his first year, and he's going to do well on a team that has always produced great defenses. But to that point, there's not really much help added to the receiver room, and obviously not all these offensive linemen that they drafted are going to start. I think some of them are going to work into the rotation. I'm really not a fan of drafting specialists, and this is coming from a guy who was a former college long snapper. My thoughts on going with 2 guys that early, I get drafting 1, but drafting 2 is really a waste of a pick. A lot of times these guys don't always make the roster. Like, don't be surprised if one of them doesn't, or maybe even both of them don't make the roster. And it's kind of just an added attempt to make sure another team didn't get one of the specialists that you liked a little bit more than the others. For me, there's not much of a difference between one that's drafted and one that's a high priority UDFA. And I think that there's plenty of guys that were high priority UDFAs, like BT Potter from Clemson, that probably could make a roster somewhere that they could have not wasted a draft pick on and taken as a UDFA.
Joe, I wanted to ask you about a guy that we have seen and liked for a long time here in this state, and that's Luke Musgrave. How do you think he fits in Green Bay?
I think that he and Tucker Kraft are going to be able to play off of each other really well. It's one guy who, with Musgrave, is a vertical threat. He is a guy who linearly is very fast. He's got decent hands. Limited route tree in a way, and is not going to provide much of an impact as a blocker, but because they took Tucker Kraft, they don't really need to worry about that with Musgrave. They can use Musgrave and deploy him as he is built to be deployed, which again is vertically attacking defenses up the seam. And I think that Jordan Love is going to have a nice target up the middle to hit on a week-to-week basis. But yeah, I think that Musgrave ends in a really good spot for a team that's a lot of young receivers that are finding their groove and finding their identity. And Jordan Love is going to need any help that he can get.
Hey, Joe, what were your thoughts on what the Bills did, especially with the selection of Dalton Kincaid, someone that we enjoyed watching at Utah, a heck of a player, getting a chance to mix with Josh Allen?
Yeah, admittedly, it feels strange being not upset, but concerned about this pick and not really being a fan of it, because he's going into an offense where he probably will provide an impact. I just think that when you're a team like the Bills that is trying to take that next step, is trying to win playoff games, I'm not sure why you're drafting a flex tight end when you already have a flex tight end on the roster. I believe that they also just paid in Dawson Knox. So it's a bit of a strange fit. If it was Darnell Washington that they selected more on day 2, I think I'd be more in favor of it, because with your tight ends, you do want some diversity in the room. But he's a good receiver. He is another player who's a good vertical threat, a good route runner, a good yards after catch player. I think he certainly will provide an impact early on in his career for the Bills. I just wonder if there were better needs to approach, like if they had gone after trying to shore up their receiving core before, again, drafting another tight end that plays a similar role to a guy that you already currently have on the roster.
Joe, the Colts jumped out and took Richardson right away. How did you think overall they did, including that selection?
Yeah, I love taking Anthony Richardson there, and it's the one team that I spoke on as his best destination. Separate from if he went somewhere that already had a sitting quarterback, he is going to a team with a brand new head coach that he's not going to be rushed. The expectation for them to win now is not significant. And I think by year 2, this team could really hit the ground running in the AFC South. That there's a lot of question marks up in the air on who the best teams are going to be outside the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think that the fit is so great is that Shane Steichen, who was the offensive coordinator with the Philadelphia Eagles last year, they used a lot of read option, a lot of quarterback design runs with Jalen Hurts. And Anthony Richardson's a bigger, better athlete and has a bigger arm than Jalen Hurts. Now, he needs to work on the accuracy for sure, and he needs to get caught up with what the expectations are for being an NFL quarterback. But what you get with this situation of he's better than Gardner Minshew, throw him out there, let him go make mistakes, run the heck out of him, get as many rushing attempts as possible. And while he's killing defenses by running the ball as much as he is, he's going to learn the game quicker, and he's going to be more acclimated to the circumstance because he fits that offense so well.
Hey, Joe, do you think the Seahawks would have taken Richardson had he been available at 5?
I don't know if they would have, because if they were interested in taking a quarterback, they had multiple opportunities to do so, to trade back in. I think that if they had an aspiration to take a quarterback, they would have tried to trade up or somewhere along those lines. But it didn't seem like there was much of an indicator. The goal, it seems, for them was addressing some of their current needs, which was receiver, which was defensive back, and then getting an additional running back into the group, and then also grabbing a good edge rusher in Derek Hall. So I really don't think they would have gone quarterback. I think that they would have made some sort of an effort to grab somebody if that was the intent.
Joe, one guy we've seen a lot of out this way is Jake Hayner, out of the quarterback out of Fresno State. And the Saints got him, and I'm wondering, what do you think his future is with them?
Yeah, I think it's a great situation for him. And one of the guys outside of Stetson Bennett that's been brought up as the Brock Purdy of the class, Jake Hayner is one name that's been discussed. He's a smaller guy, but he's just really well-rounded. I think he's a very high-level starter, and I think it's awesome that he's going to be sitting behind another Fresno State quarterback in Derek Carr. But what's going to work for him is that he's going to a spot where if something does happen with Derek Carr and the expectations aren't great, maybe he can step in for a series, or if Carr goes down with an injury, he's going to be a really consistent go-to option. But I really see his expectations as being a high-level starter, and he has every capability of accomplishing that.
We're talking with Joe DeLeone from the BLEAV Podcast Network here in the Rip City Drive. Final question for you. And I know it's hard because we haven't seen the draft classes play yet, but which team do you think had the draft that jumped out at you the most in terms of being the best, and which was the biggest head scratcher?
Yeah, I really love what the Indianapolis Colts did. That one really, really jumped out to me for having the best class. And we already talked about Anthony Richardson, but getting a 6'4" corner in Julius Brent in the second round, and then coming back around and getting Josh Downs, who I had high on my board, way above some of the other guys that were drafted. Very shifty, explosive receiver. And then also managing to get Blake Freeland, who had a historic testing day at the Combine for offensive tackles, and then Adio Boire, who had a historic testing day for defensive tackles at the NFL Combine. They got so many rare athletes that they're adding to that team, and I think that's a strategy that isn't deployed enough. I think that a lot of teams could be more competitive if they tried to get more expensive athletes on their roster, and they had so many picks, so they're able to take that chance to see which guys work out. But man, they really could have put together an explosive team that in a few seasons could be doing serious damage. And if I were to share the one that I think was a big head scratcher, I did not like what the Dallas Cowboys did. I felt like a lot of their picks were reaches. I think Mozzie Smith in the first round, not an every down player. He's a space eater that's inconsistent. I think he was a second-round pick at best, and the first round was a reach, as well as Luke Shoemaker with Darnell Washington on the board or Tucker Kraft on the board. Was not a very big fan of that. So the one that I was the most concerned with absolutely was the Dallas Cowboys.
All right, Joe DeLeone here on the Rip City Drive. On Twitter at Joe DeLeone. You can check the First Team Pod, also with the BLEAV Podcast Network. Joe, you're really good at what you do. We appreciate the time. Thank you for making time for us and sharing your insight, buddy. We'll talk in the future.
Of course. Thanks so much, guys.